The next lesson on the quarterstaff is how to defend yourself against multiple opponents. This scenario was of course something the quarterstaff was also made for. If we consider the various staff fighting traditions, which survived also in Europe, their purpose quite often is not only duel fighting, but defending yourself against more than one opponent. Very famous example is Portuguese jogo do pau. The most famous story about an English soldier defending himself against 3 Spanish soldiers who were armed with rapier and dagger is well known. He used a halberd without the head as a makeshift quarterstaff to defend himself. His story became very famous in the 17th century England. I will put a link down below in the video description about his story. Also, our 18th century manuals mention the use of the quarterstaff in this way. Archibald MacGregor mentions how you could use a staff to make your way through a crowd or a riot. And sheriff's guards would use tipped staffs, so with metal caps or pointy caps at the end of the staff, to keep up the order. Similar to the Edinburgh town guards, who were still using the Lochaber axe for security work in the second half of the 18th century. And then again, we also know that some kind of referee would keep up the order with a staff in prize fights, so the gladiators would stick to the settled rules. We do not have too much real how-to material for these scenarios, but you can use the basic techniques you have trained and combine these with footwork for different scenarios. For example, defending yourself in a narrow alley to both sides or in a crowded place. You can defend yourself against opponents in front of you or just from one side or both sides, or even if you are totally surrounded, which is the worst case scenario. Obviously, the known rules for the use of the Iberian Montante, so a great two-handed sword, come into mind, and it is not a crime to have a look into them to learn more about it. So here we start with some basic solo drills you can use. We start with some simple cut 1 and cut 2 cross-cutting, just like we do it with a Scottish two-handed sword. You clear the space in front of you and you can change the angle and the level of the line of attack, so from high line to low line and back. The next is cross-cutting in one or both angles from a low line to the midsection, with 2 or 3 strikes which end in a hanging guard to protect your head. You can do this in forward and backwards motion. The next step is to use turning motions to defend the same way to both sides. So what you are using in footwork is kind of a full traverse, so you turn from one side to another side completely. The next step is to use this in a 360-degree defense, but start slowly so you do not confuse yourself too easy. Next we use thrusts in different hand positions and footwork according to Zachary Wild, first starting with only one side. Then we use one thrust, turn around, and combine it with striking. And then we start to put in more than one thrust, so you thrust one side and then through the other side. The next step is to combine all these things and use them in half staff as well as in the long grip. With the half staff grip you can use a lot of butt strikes and short darts like you would use the musket butt in bayonet fencing. And yes, indeed, whirling for fun is allowed, because it is a nice exercise to learn control over your staff. A risky but sometimes useful technique is a one-handed thrust, which gives you a lot of reach and still has powerful impact. Train how to use this and then turning to the other side under cover and very controlled. Now combine all this, what you learned, and train this as a solo drill. Just keep the staff flowing and moving, and try to imagine where your opponents are and what they are doing and what's best reaction of yourself is. The next step are partner drills. So if you have only one training partner available, then try to imagine the other opponents behind you. You can use a heavy bag or fencing mask or some other dummy to have a real target. Start slowly with simple drills and let your partner then start to move towards you with every action. The opponent can have a sword, a dagger, cudgel, or just playing the unarmed ruffian. Real sparring or fighting scenarios you should only do with very safe training gear. So please do not use an ash or oaken staff for contact scenarios, of course. Even a rattan staff might be too dangerous. Very useful are soft bows, which you can get in any martial arts shops online. They are very safe, have still enough impact to create some respect, and you can train the drills with soft weapons in the hands of your opponents as well. They are of course lighter than the real thing, but at least you can go full force and with full speed without injuries. So here we have some dangers when fighting with a staff. Of course, always take care of your hands. If you misjudge the distance or timing, you might get stuck and your opponent gets the upper hand in close quarters. So here are similar dangers with staff like in example with a musket and a bayonet. The main problem, however, is in comparison to a pike or a two-handed sword or something similar, that you don't have a sharp object which can be gripped safer by your opponents. One important method to avoid this is to constantly change the levels of attack and to pull back your staff after thrusting very quickly, so similar as we talked about in one of our previous lessons. And keep in mind that you can change the grip, so your butt end surprisingly becomes longer and you strike from a different angle if your opponent comes too quick, too close.